the only guarantee is that you're going to fail at times, and just make sure that you're able to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep moving forward.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon. Welcome, everybody, to day 2 of the 2024 Winter Symposium. You see, we have a panelist up here that'll talk all about the workforce development.
Good morning. I'm Steve Kelly. I'm the fire chief at Miami Township Fire and EMS in Claremont County. It's my 28th year in the fire service, and last 10 of that being the chief. So being involved in developing and looking for the next generation of the fire service professionals has been something that I've taken on as a passion over the last few years.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Chad Hollinger. I'm the fire chief at the Sydney Department of Fire and Emergency Services. I've been in the fire service since 1995. I started as a volunteer, progressed to a combination department, and then to a career job with the city of Monroe, and then a year later at the city of Sydney. Really got passionate about workforce development, recruitment, retention through the OFE program. That's when I started studying this out. And just the more you learn about it, the more you realize you don't know. So it's an ever-evolving situation. It's a fun challenge to try to wrap your arms around because you never quite make that reach. But just excited to be here.
Morning, everybody. Steve Egenbrode with the Clear Creek Fire District. In May will be my 30th year with the department. Been the chief for a little over 7 years. I got on the panel as workforce development. We are suffering from a lot of issues in the fire service. There's cancer, but nothing is hitting us all like our workforce development. Whether you're an all-career department or a volunteer fire department or anywhere in between, you're having problems recruiting and retaining members. So this is something that I am passionate about, because if we don't figure out how to do this right, we're in for a real rough road.
All right, well, thank you. So we'll kick this off with just talking about how we got to a workforce development and how this panel was put together and why the discussion was even started. The Ohio Fire Chiefs Association had done a strategic plan, and that strategic plan was from 2022 to 2027, and one of those objectives or goals within that plan is to discuss and try to find solutions to the recruiting and retention issues that we face across the state of Ohio. Talking about just the simple fact of having a decreased amount of applicants, certified and both non-certified, and what kind of applicants you're seeing on a regular basis.
Yeah, so I think one of the issues that we're seeing, and I've said this, I'm going to back it up even a little bit further. You know, we do a fantastic job of going into the schools and doing a lot of prevention and education with kids when they're in kindergarten all the way up through about 4th grade. And then we walk away from them. And then we come back to them in high school and we say, don't you want to be a firefighter? And they say, I don't even know what that means. No, really I don't, because I've talked to my mom and dad and they want me to be an engineer, attorney, a doctor, something like that. So I think we just have a lot of education to go back and do. So I think it's an awareness piece. A lot of folks in our community, let's face it, don't know what we do. They have an assumption that we're sitting in the fire station waiting for the call to come in, and we're probably making a bowl of chili for lunch, and we're probably playing cards while we're waiting for that call to come in. And I think that mentality is just there in the community. They kind of, I don't want to say take us for granted, but we show up when they call. And other than that, if we're not out there putting ourselves into the community, doing the prevention things and getting out there and showing up in the times when they don't need us, then I think we've just lost an opportunity to continually educate them about who we are and the services that we perform. So for me, that's one of the things that we've been working on, is trying to get into the schools as early, keep that 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade kind of a relationship going so that we can have a conversation with them. And now we're finding new ways to try to get with the parents as well and talk to the parents about our line of work, public safety in general, as a viable option for a career path where they can make a very good living and have a very stable job to work in for many years. And maybe they don't have to go to college right away, because many of you might be like me, kind of that non-traditional student that wasn't a great fit for college right out of high school, but got back into it at some point and then found a way to be successful with advanced education. That's one of my pieces on that.
Yeah, when we talk about a decreased number of applicants and the certified, non-certified question, at Sydney, we have, in my time there, we have always hired non-certifieds, certifieds alike. If you're 18 years old, have a high school diploma and a clean enough background, we'll hire you. And that model has worked well for us. I know that there's some agencies that I've interacted with over the last couple of years who've said they've tried that model and it doesn't work for them. It puts people that, 10, 15 years of tenure on the department back on a medic unit while new people are going through class and getting certified. So the model doesn't work for everybody. But even more specifically, when you look at the decreased number of applicants, I think there's been a number of changes in our society that have impacted this in a myriad of ways. We see on TV these shows portraying what we do one way, and reality is very, very different than what's portrayed on TV. And then when we bring a student in for a job shadow and they spend an hour or two with one of our fire prevention officers, and they say, this isn't nothing like what I saw on Chicago Fire or any others. Yeah, you're right. Thank God it's not. We would not want that kind of drama in the firehouse. But I think the like you said, Steve, the expectation of what they think we do and what we actually do are very different. And I think we may talk about this a little bit later here. Our career for most of us has become very EMS heavy and light on fire, which for our community is a good thing. We're not burning down houses like we were in the 80s. But when people pursue the career of firefighter and they find out that more often than not you're a paramedic or an EMT, I think that disillusions some of them that maybe this isn't for me.
Civil service process. Do you think that hinders the ability for these young individuals to come into our service because of this lengthy process of hiring? Begin to have a lot closer, say benefits, pay, so on and so forth with the private sector. What do you think about the civil service, process?
Yeah, I think it does. When we talk with young people, and I have two daughters, one's 19, one's 21, and I talk with my oldest daughter, who's an HR generalist at a company close to Sydney, and she looks at what we do. She said, that's just insane. Young people are not going to sit around waiting for that job offer to come through. And the way we engage them through recruitment and the application process, I mean, up until a few years ago in Sydney, we still required people to come in and get a piece of paper, fill it out, and send it back. And she's like, that's just crazy. What are you doing? That we have this thing called the internet, Dad. Use it. And this time that it takes for us to onboard somebody, there's just not the patience there. There's not the, for most of us, I think, in the room looking around, I think we're probably of that generation where we tested against hundreds, if not thousands of other people for several positions. And it was worth the wait because you get a gold ticket if you get your name called. And, there's many more jobs available now. And I think this application process, as long as it is, it does hinder some applicants.
So we don't have civil service, but in the townships, we're kind of able to pivot and move more quickly on a lot of these things. And I think what you've seen is a lot of us that have control over our hiring processes, and it's not spoken to in a charter or a civil service commission. We have really pared that down to try to expedite the process for these folks to get through the application and onboarded as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, that's created kind of an uneven playing field. So the folks that are working in cities that have to do this a very certain way, and there has to be time commitments to it. If we don't have to do that in jurisdictions that have townships or, any other kind of fire authority type thing, that just frees us up to take those people more quickly. And then that frustrates the cities. And I know that we've looked at it from the policy standpoint to see if there's a way to ask for legislation that could help shorten that for smaller jurisdictions that were cities and villages and things. But unfortunately, there's just no mechanism to rectify that right now. So we're stuck with the process that we have.
So that talks about just entry level that are maybe non-certified or even certified if they're coming to your place. But I got a question that came in from somebody in the audience. It says, do you feel that the lateral job opportunities have helped or have they hindered our industry?
Yes.
Yes. What is that? You might do the lateral. We don't do the lateral. So it depends on the different cities. And so why would you think it helps or hinders it?
Well, I think it does both. We will be running our first lateral process in Sydney this coming year. We're working through that now, getting all the pieces and parts in place to be able to do that. And through our charter, we were able to adopt a more streamlined application process in that lateral hiring system. The downside to that is, as we all know, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Somebody's losing a good employee to another organization that, for whatever reason, it could be culture, it could be pay, it could be a number of different things that are causing this person to seek other opportunities. But I see a lot of shifting within our industry and not bringing in the numbers of new people. So we've got a lot of folks in that 5 to 15 year range that are moving from organization to organization. Like I said, in some chasing dollars, but a trend that I see more often now is chasing culture, looking for a situation where they fit, their core values align with the core values of the organization. And I think laterals have the ability to be a good thing if done right, for the right reasons, but I can see where some organizations become a breeding ground of just develop, and then they go somewhere else. And that can be immensely frustrating for those organizations that are investing the time and treasure into these individuals. And then the fruits of that work are enjoyed by another community or another organization.
I do think that you make a good point when it comes to, it depends on the type of organization, I think. I think because if you have the type of organization that has, long-term retention, so individuals that are there 15 plus years and you have a larger group of those, laterals may not be the right solution for it, for your organization. I think that when you speak to the culture thing, I think it does affect the culture a lot. Could it help change that culture? Because we know that sometimes those cultures that are well ingrained in our organizations make it such an issue that maybe that's a culture you're looking to change. But I'm not sure that the lateral person changes that type of culture. Now, I would say, but in the exact opposite, you got departments that see a large turnover, where you're essentially a breeding ground and a stepping stone for the next bigger department. And so if you are that one where they're coming in, those departments, I think, could greatly appreciate the lateral position because of the experience that someone brings, rather than because they just lack on a lot of the experience that maybe that organization has. So, it really depends on the department, right? Wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, we did our first lateral entry process at Clear Creek 2 processes ago. And the reason we went to it was with the labor pool being so shallow, we're opening an additional station. So we were going to be hiring 20 people over a relatively short period of time. And, the first big wave was 10. So if we were going to hire 10 people, we needed to get as many applicants as we could. So that's where we actually ran 2 processes simultaneously. We ran an entry-level process and a lateral process, and we hired 5. So it just kind of worked out that way. That wasn't the plan. That's just how it worked out. And that allowed us to bring 10 high-quality candidates into the department at one time. Because I think if we would have done it just an entry-level person looking at the list, once you got past, that 5 or 6 mark, it was tough.
Did they go through a separate hiring process?
Yeah, we ran them parallel, but they were separate processes.
So what was the difference?
Essentially the entry level had to do a written test, and we did not require the lateral entry people to do a written test. We based it off their experience. But other than that, really, the processes were similar.
Okay.
If I can jump real quick on that, I think one thing, whether you want to say it's good or bad, it's created an opportunity that I think a lot of us, when we got hired in the fire service, it wasn't there, right? You got the job that you got, like Chad said, and you just stayed put. I think now it's it's met people where they are in their life and their career. And what I mean by that is the younger generations want that variety. They want to be able to choose and chase culture. The money might not be as important to them, but they might value other things that you have too, right? So it might be time off. It might be some of the other benefits that you're looking at and saying, well, I didn't think that was a big deal. But, for people to be able to transfer in things like sick time or get credit or even seniority based on vacation leave and things like that they had bringing in from another place. It's created an opportunity for people to be consumers of the jobs that they're looking for. And I think we all enjoy that in our lives. Whether you're out looking for a job or not, you enjoy the opportunity to have choice. And I think we're trying to meet a lot of the younger generation there where they want that choice.
Which does start a lot with culture, so that work-life balance, right. How much they're going to be, it's a lot different before of where, the generation that would work all the overtime that was always available to where you don't have a lot of the young ones that even want to work overtime at all. So,
right.
Yeah. All right, bunch of questions that are coming in, so keep them coming in, audience. We really appreciate it. The next one, let's see. Firefighters are making $100,000 a year, so which is great for them and their families. But this has been done to retain our employees, attract them from other departments, essentially. So, it's just, hey, if I pay more, I can steal, because again, that the generation that we are dealing with they do look for more money, and it might be 50 cents that they're moving for. And so, is this sustainable? Is it sustainable, in which will our cities and townships be broke? And so first of all, is it sustainable? Will our cities and townships be broke? Will our residents start turning against us because of these high salaries?
It's a good question.
Which it is, because in your local communities, depending on what is your identity of your city or your township and what they're making at the local places that they work, and then everybody thinks a firefighter sleeps until they're hungry and eats until they're tired type of deal.
Right.
So is that true? Do you think that becomes an issue?
I do. I was sharing with somebody this week. We had a situation in our community. One of our members, he and his family had saved and saved and saved, done very well, taking care of their personal finances, and found themselves in a position where they were able to move into a more affluent part of our neighborhood in our community. And after moving in there, a local business owner said something to the effect of, "I never thought a public servant would be living in this neighborhood." Now, this was before we had gotten to a point where we had the salaries we have now. We just had somebody who worked very hard, was very good with their finances, and was able to enjoy a little nicer standard of living. I think it is going to be problematic for us for a number of reasons. One, many of our organizations, we're not at the staffing levels we desire, and the more we pay our people, the harder it is to add staff, because that costs more money. It does. Going back to my union president days, I remember when we would start negotiating, and we'd look out in the parking lot, and we'd have a parking lot full of $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 pickup trucks. How are we going to go across the street and ask for more money when we're driving $80,000 pickup trucks, gentlemen? Drive your grandpa's beater to work for a couple weeks, please. Help us out here. But yeah, I think there will be some pushback from the community. Now, on the same token, though, I think we need to do a good job of educating our community what our people do. I say it often around the station and over at City Hall. You agreed, 80% of the time we are way overpaid, but 20% of the time you couldn't afford us. The things we do in those moments, those 20%, there's no amount of money on the planet that we would give somebody to save a child, save my house from burning down. So there's a balancing act that I think we're going to have to play as we move forward in this new economy where, a lot of, I was just talking with somebody the other day, they said that in the Northwest, CERB released their report, and I think salaries this year were somewhere in the 4 to 5% range. And we've never had that. My best contract I ever negotiated for this, it was a 3% raise, and I was excited to have it. So we do have a challenging path ahead of us when we start talking the dollars and cents.
I want to hear your perspective, Steve. Because Steve, if you don't know, Steve is actually an interim, administrator right now. So that you're seeing it from both the fire chief side, but also the administrator side, and seeing it across your entire, the entire organization. So, what's your thoughts on it?
Right. Well, I think Chad's right. We have 4 contracts coming up this fall to be negotiated, 2 in police, 1 fire, and 1 service. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. And I looked at that wage report briefly, but I've got a lot of diving in to do. I think what's going to happen is, because you're seeing the same problem with recruitment and retention across all industries. We know it when we've gone out to dinner last night and there's not enough servers to take care of the table. There's just a lot of opportunities out there for people to get jobs in different markets and not enough workers to fill those. So I think what we're going to be faced with at some point is really just kind of sharpening the pencil and figuring out how to do our jobs better, right? Across the board. And I think that's a conversation ultimately the elected officials are going to have to open themselves up to with the community to find out, what do you want to support? What level of service do you expect? What do you want us to provide for you, and how do you want it? And those can be tough conversations. We all know in our line of work that there can be a lot of redundancy when you've got fire trucks and stations that are in close proximity to one another, and a lot of people that might work full-time for you might have one or two other part-time jobs if they still believe in that. So I think it's going to force us to start to look at ways to sharpen our pencils about how we afford these services and what level of services we're going to provide, and then how we do it. Whether that's consolidation into joint districts, and we're already starting to see some of it. And I know last year at conference, there were two chiefs that were talking about how they have paired together to provide services to their communities and stuff. I think we're going to start seeing some more of that as you talk about some of these runaway costs and the inability for some of the taxpayers to want to shoulder that burden.
Can the Ohio Fire Chiefs create a transfer portal like the NCAA men's football, similar to the NTN entry level for where firefighters put their application in, they're in a portal, and then you get to go to draft day. So you're going to get the best ones for it. I will say, I will piggyback on that question a little bit. It's just that I know that I talked to Tire Chief Jack Roop yesterday, and I know in his area, they were at least doing something in Central Ohio where they had 3 departments doing for their part-time staff, where as we all are hindered by this 1,500-hour rule or the ability to not give them insurance, but yet it's damaging to the employee, to the firefighter, because they want to work the hours. It's just the hours aren't available to be able to work. And I think that that's the worst thing that we've could have done. I thought that the public sector should have been excluded from that, being that it's not the same as what the private sector's doing and taking advantage of these employees and the whole reason why it was created. There was a few departments in Central Ohio that they kind of did create this portal. They all paid the same. The only downside to it was the mere fact that you did get hired at 3 different departments. So you had 3 W-2s and you had 3, of everything. In the hindsight, they did actually get to work every 3rd day. They worked out areas to be able to share turnout gear. So my employee this time, I purchased the turnout gear and they had the ability to take it to their other organizations. I think this question kind of goes along with that, just maybe at a bigger, broader spectrum. We do got to figure out a way to do something a little different, and we constantly are just stealing from each other, quite honestly. So maybe if you have the discussions before, if they're all in a portal, would it be something that would work?
Well, I did notice that when this question was asked that our president-elect got up and left the room. So I don't know if he's resigning currently, like we are not doing a portal. But no, I heard that conversation with Chief Rupp, and that is an interesting solution to the problem. One of the things that we have never done in Sydney, we've always been a career department, we've never engaged the part-time situation, and talking with chiefs that do, they say it is a fantastic interview process, and I think we need to look at these issues in a new light. We've had some conversations in the northern Miami Valley. Some of the chiefs have talked about what would it look like if I had a firefighter that worked 3 months in Sydney, 3 months in Piqua, 3 months in Troy, 3 months in Tip, and then they rotate back. And I think it would help with some cultural things. Maybe life isn't so bad where you thought it was, but or maybe Chad really is that bad. I want to stay somewhere else. But I think as we look at these things, like the solution you mentioned, and to speak to what Steve said, the collaboration, the thinking out of the box, that's where we're at. I mean, that's why we wanted to do this forum, because we don't have all the answers. We're at the starting end of this goal too, and trying to wrap our arms around the full scope of this problem. And from our limited perspectives at our home departments, a charter city with home rule and a township and fire districts and where everybody else is, the problems may be similar, but they are not the same. The issue varies depending on your demographics and where you're at in the state.
Chief Roop, Jack, do you want to add to it? Do you want to give the audience any bit of piece about it? We have Deeks, if you want to give him the microphone.
Well, at the time that we did it, it worked really well, but then as the 3 departments kind of changed their staffing schemes, and one of the departments started adding more full-time people, then the idea of that rotation of 3 broke down. So it's not something that those 3 departments do currently. Probably did it for about a 3-year period. It was pretty successful, but then as things changed, it subsided.
And you think it changed because of the growth of the 3 departments, or why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
If you flip that over too real quick, the employees have created their own transfer portal at this point, and it is our lateral processes, right? They're shopping for the team that they want to go play for. So we just need to figure out how we're building our organizations to accommodate that.
Which goes with this other question here that has more concepts or most likely present, but overall when trying to fill staffing needs, it seems like the wages just aren't enough in this day and age. It seems the younger workforce today are much more different when I entered the service nearly 30 years ago. And we could all agree with that, right?
Absolutely.
That's the major change of why individuals aren't necessarily, I mean, they don't have I worked there for the same fire department or the same job 30 years. They're willing to jump ship in a year or 5 years. The majority of part-time departments in our region are struggling to find employees. We are considering in starting to compensate candidates while in training once an agreement is signed. What are your thoughts?
That's exactly what we do. Like I said, we hire somebody off the street with a high school diploma, 18 years of age, and a decent background. We pay them to go to school. We pay them for the school. And I think for many of our members of our department, at least, there is that loyalty that is established when you invest that kind of time and energy into people. You let them know that they're a part of a family, and I think it is worthwhile. Now, that may not be true for everybody. I have the opportunity to teach in the foundational leadership program, and just shared with the last couple classes this spring. The question of the generation coming in now is not like we were. And I posed this question to the class: what do you think the generation ahead of the traditionalists, the greatest generation, said about them? They probably said some of the same things we're saying now about the generation coming in. Every generation that comes after you does not meet your expectations where you're at. And it has to be a change of perspective. One of the classes, we had an individual share that as part of their orientation, they're now teaching their new recruits how to make their bed. My mama taught me how to do that. No, that's not so in today's gen. So, as these people are coming in to build that loyalty, to build that culture, we need to meet them where they are and teach them the way they need to be taught, because it's not like the way we were.
To the question here, like for the paying of the part-time or paying for anybody in the position of like when they're first starting in a department, I think if you're not doing that, that would be a critical part of being able to try to get somebody out of high school. A lot of times that I think we all have open jobs, or we're always saying like, hey, we're always hiring, but what are we always hiring? Are we always hiring full-time firefighters that are going to come out making $50,000, $60,000 a year? Or are you always hiring the $17 an hour part-time? And I think that the 17-hour part-time is the guy or gal that we're always hiring that we're not going to offer them insurance and we're going to restrict them to 24 hours a week. If you're going to try to be attractive to somebody coming outside of high school, you got to have that. They have to have some sort of salary. And then you have to look at the salary of what they deal with in your local community of what that pays. I know that in both cities that I was in previous, as far as speaking to city leadership and to trying to get it sold of why we made our pay rates up to $25 an hour in a very small community, was because the local industry that you could go work at made $27 an hour. Training and education that firefighters and paramedics need to go through, they're worth every penny of it. For them to have the training, which is, in the city of Oregon, we still maintain a combination department as well. And I want to maintain that combination department for the attraction of individuals that want to enter the fire service. The ability that we can pay for their tuition, because my son being 24 years old now, my daughter that's 18, both of them want to come out of school with no college debt. And that is a common thing with all of the high school students right now that we're hearing a lot of times. I blanket that by saying all. I don't mean all, but majority of them that you'll hear that's the concern. Mom and dad have student loans that are $80,000 on every time, that restricts them in so many other ways. So I think that the younger generation is looking to get into careers without having to pay for any college. So we're hammering that home as far as trying to get the fact that we will pay for your EMT class, we will pay for your fire class, we will pay for your paramedic class. Because if you don't have the part-time spot to be a feeder for your full-time, then you'll be on the outside looking in. In the end, the culture wins. I 100% believe that. So to Chad's point, where you had stated that the blanket of them being able to test the waters at other departments really, really helps, and they may not realize that the grass is greener on the other side, or they may realize the grass is greener on the other side. That I think the culture does eventually win, but they do have to be able to, take care of their families if they do have one. And if they're not, think about the people that you're trying to attract. So the ones you're trying to attract are the ones between, like, say, 18 to 26. So having a part-time department, I went to one of our younger guys to be able to meet with them as far as the change in the generation. And I said, hey, tell me, because I was fixated on the fact that I thought that we needed to get this insurance. Like, we needed to be able to have an opportunity for individuals to have insurance. Well, what the fact of the matter was is they didn't really care about the insurance. Well, I have mom and dad's insurance till I'm 26. I care about what that paycheck says. I care about it being, that higher rate, because that's what they're focused on. Now, it's a completely different mindset for where we're at. Maybe if all of us, majority of us sitting here in the room, and we think about other things as far as insurance and things of that nature for our families, in their regard, it's not. So that's how we ended up changing it at the previous at my previous department. Not saying that works for every organization, but I would think about that maybe if you can get them in, pay them while they're doing the training, pay for their training if you can.
Something we're looking at doing along those lines is a paid internship. So we have a career center in our community now, and we have an internship program where they send us one or three students, one per shift, every semester, and they come and just do their typical internship with the department. So what we're looking at doing, because their enrollment is up, which is a good sign for us, at least in our area, is they're expanding their program. They're having to add classes. So looks like some people are getting more interested in doing this kind of work. So I think our marketing is helping in that realm. But what we were talking about doing is bringing them in for their typical internship with the school, and then they graduate their level 2 fire and EMT, and then right upon graduation, offering them a paid internship. If they completed their internship with us unpaid, essentially that would be our time to vet them and onboard them into the organization. And then when they come in, they would be a paid intern, which is similar to a part-time person. It's just going to be tagged a little bit different. And then the demographic we're looking there is the 18 to 26-year-old, where they just graduated high school, they're still living at home, they're on their parents' insurance, and they're going to get to work at a fire department every 6 days for 24 hours and make some money and go along those lines. And then that hopefully will act as a feeder system into our department for career employees, because the thought is they'll be local people. They live there. They have roots established, and we'll be able to keep them on. So we're not looking to do that until next year. So I won't know, but maybe when we do part 2 of the podcast, could update the group.
I do think that's a great idea. It's an opportunity for all career departments to be able to kind of get individuals in to see see how your organization works, see if they want to be a part of it, because usually you get those if they come and ride clinical hours. And I do want to get to this question that came in. It was Chief Kelly mentioned consolidating departments. Chief Root's part-time sharing process had merit. So why aren't we discussing the advantages more of you trying to create a program and you trying to create a program and you try to create a program? Why aren't we discussing it more of why we all create one program and be more districts, co-ops like you see up in the Northwest between Waterville and White House departments? So why aren't we discussing that more?
I'll start with that just because I am a district, and we have done that. We provide services to both the township and the city, and it's a really good way to go. And our board had a vision back in the late 80s when they decided they wanted to do that, and it's worked very well for our community. So I'm a big fan of consolidation.
But did it consolidate when you had all established departments? Because I feel like that might be the ego issues that we fight today, like, because the next neighbor department, and all the way to the point where they don't want to do even automatic aid or mutual aid, because I'm afraid that if you're coming to my organization, if you're coming into my district more, then it's going to show my people that I can't do it, and we need to, consolidate. And I don't want to consolidate because I'm still holding on to the 100-year-old tradition. So were they established departments or no?
They were not. No, it started early and they grew. So and solving the ego problem, I think, is beyond the scope of this panel.
Yeah, I do agree.
Right. But that is definitely a problem. Definitely a problem.
Why wouldn't we have one department? Countywide? Because I was saying in the state of Ohio, there's no countywide fire departments.
No, but we see it work in like Florida and Georgia,
Yeah.
time and time again. I think a lot of that then again goes back up to the conversation that the elected officials would have to have with one another, right? That a lot of that would be solved if a township and a city or whoever got together and said, look, we can't support our services. How can we work with you? And there's just a lot of difficulty sometimes in that a lot of elbows go out and there's that, well, we have ours and that's ours and we're going to protect it. We all work in a very sharing environment for the most part, where mutual aid is not an issue and sharing of resources and personnel is just something that's expected for the safety of our personnel as well as the people that we're serving. So I think that again has to be something that you could take as an idea to your elected officials, or even something at a county level chiefs organization could start having those conversations. But Steve's right. There's just a lot of barriers if you already have some of those things established to try to overcome to even have those conversations without getting people riled up.
Yeah, we looked at doing what Jack was saying earlier in the late 90s with a township department just to the north of us. And we were going to do one process. You get a job, you could work every third day, just with, every 6th day at the department. And we did polygraphs as part of our hiring process. They did not, and they would not do polygraphs, and that basically made the whole program fall apart.
Right.
And and the reason we do on part-time people, we had a situation, how that is in government. Once you have a situation and it's now established, we're going to do that. And the other department didn't want to incur the cost because they had not had that situation.
Let's take a look back about 10 years. Do you think that when residency changed, do you think it changed the fire service? And is it changed for a good thing or maybe not?
I don't know that it can be solely blamed for what we're facing today as we look at the global workforce development issues. But I think it's definitely a component. For organizations my size, we rely heavily on recall and bringing people back in for immediate staffing and box alarms. And when we have somebody that is driving an hour to a recall, they may show up in time to help roll some hose, and that's about it. And then the dependence becomes more on our volunteer neighbors to augment our response. So I think it's definitely a component to this conversation, but I don't know that it can be shouldered with the full weight of that is the problem. I don't believe it is the problem, but it's certainly a piece.
Well, I think the other thing that we fight too is one of the other comments that came in was what a normal work week is. So some of our departments have different work weeks. I could work at this organization, I'm working a 56-hour work week, I get 7 days off a year and that's it. I can go to the next place, I work a 53 and now I get, 13 Kelly days or I get 7 Kelly days. I go to the next place, it's a 50-hour work week and I get 13 Kelly days. I go to the other place, I'm working a 24/72. And I may not have any Kelly days, but I'm working. So do we think that the difference in work schedules definitely play a role in this as well?
I would say so, and I think that's another piece of it too, right? At the end of the day, for those of us that have a union department, they would have to have a voice in this, because if you're going to talk about mergers or consolidation in any way, shape, or form, what does that look like from the contractual side of things? How do you come up with a new collective bargaining agreement, and what parts of that? Conceptually, we would all want the best of everything, right? So everybody that's got a great CBA, let's take all the really good stuff and put it in one pot. Well, that might wind up at the cost of a firefighter closer to $200,000, So I think that's another really difficult conversation that just has to be had. Not to mention the fact that, let's face it, a lot of us in this room, we're very proud of our titles as fire chiefs and stuff, but somebody's going to have to step back so that others can lead an organization, and maybe you have to go down a rung or something, or 2 rungs, and be willing to kind of give up what we've all perceived that we've worked very hard for. But there's kind of, again, that feeling of what are you going to have to give to make this happen? A lot. And a lot of people are going to have to give a lot to make those kinds of things happen. But what's the outcome in the long run? Is it beneficial for everybody? And ultimately, does it serve the community in a way that's more efficient and more effective for them? Maybe more cost efficient, especially right now with the way that the economy is. So I think these are all conversations that have to be had at some point, and I think we've done a good job of staving that off as long as possible, and now it's knocking on the door.
What we can increase the pay for EMT, paramedic, etc. But we can only after 28 hours per week under the 1,500 hour rule. It is killing us. Is there a waiver system available for us to get out of this requirement? And now I understand that, just so let's clarify this. So 1,500 hours for cities, right?
Townships.
Townships, both?
Townships.
Townships only, okay. So I thought the townships were more. Why did I think the townships got a little bit higher?
During COVID, they did up that number.
Okay.
But that has since ceased, and it went back to 1,500.
And then it went back. So everybody's at 1,500. If you go over 1,500, which is essentially that, less than 30 hours a week or whatever, that they have to be offered a medical plan, right?
Yeah, I think the language says benefits.
And just so everybody knows, as far as that goes, the medical plan, I think, is you would have to check with your locals, but there's a certain look back period. Everybody thinks that it might be January 1st to December 31st, but it's actually like in my city, in the last two cities I was at, was October 31st was the deadline. So our look back period was from November 1st to October 31st. So just double check with your HR director or wherever you're at, so you're not, getting behind, that you might understand when, depending on when you hire that said employee, that they may have a lot of extra hours that they could work. So if you hire them in July, then you may not be really worried about that 30-hour rule, which is very beneficial as they're first starting and going through training and trying to get onboarded. But then you might relook at that when it starts November 1st of them having to come back on. I will say one of the things that we instituted was a 24-hour every 6 day. That does come up to being just shy of that 1,500 hours. That is what we call a permanent part-time position. Now, in our city, we do offer a single medical plan. So if they do go over the 1,500 hours, then we do offer them a single medical plan. However, because we are a combination department and also have a union contract, I always want to keep that in mind as well.
What you're referencing with the 30 hours is the Affordable Care Act and the wages, and the benefits that go with that. The 1,500 hour rule is a separate thing in Ohio law, which is just strictly for townships, I believe over 50 people, but don't quote me on that. So those are two separate things as far as the 30 hours and the 1,500. So the whole loading up and all of that, the look back period, that's pertaining to the Affordable Care Act. That's not necessarily the 1,500 hour rule. And the just offering them and then turning it down, that could be different for the Ohio law versus the Federal Care Act. So got to be careful with that. And offering waivers, there are some departments that offer waivers, but that's not necessarily in the state law. You're going to have to rely on your local law director to give you guidance there, because that's the person that will have to defend you, because when someone signs that waiver and turns down the benefits and then they get 3 years on the job and they don't want to give up those benefits anymore and then they sue you, your law director is going to have to defend that stance. So it's not something we can give you advice as the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. That's something you have to work with your local law director to get guidance on. So just wanted to make sure everyone understood there's two things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess I didn't really realize that either myself. So you're saying what the 1,500 hour rule, I always was under the understanding that the 1,500 hour rule was what determined whether I had to offer a medical plan.
That does not pertain to municipalities at all. It's just townships.
So if I can let them work as much as they want in a city and they don't have to.
Under that, yes, but under the Affordable Care Act, no.
Okay.
That's the 30-hour requirement.
Yeah.
That's where you work in the 24 every 6, keeps you under the 30 hours. And if you do the math, you can pick up an extra shift occasionally, keeps you under that, and the look-back period for that. Those are completely separate things, and everyone follows the Affordable Care Act. Townships follow the 1,500-hour rule based on your workforce.
And why do you guys follow the 1,500 hour rule?
For our department?
Yeah.
Because we work for a township.
So what is different then? If you have somebody that works over 1,500 hours in the township or district, then
we have to provide them with, well, we don't have part-time anymore. So, but if we did, then we would have to offer them the way it was described to me by our law directors, we would have to offer them a benefits package comparable to our full-time people.
Gotcha. But they all have different views on it. Okay.
And this question brings back, I guess, to goal 2 and the overall global look of what this committee is doing. The subcommittee, Workforce Development, and the Policy Committee is taking a look at all of these different aspects of this issue. And this one that we just discussed very much speaks to, the legal side, and that's why we have a legislative committee that's involved. And we know that there's going to be ideas and things that arise, whether it's certification, non-certification, whether it's hours worked, benefits, all of those different things that we deal with as we're talking through workforce development, aside from recruitment and retention and development and all of the facets of this. There's so many pieces and parts with tentacles, like Steve just said. We have a state law that allows this and a federal law that prohibits that. Well, what do we do with that? Well, the next panel is going to talk about the same thing. We have a state law that says this, a federal law that says that. So we got to be very careful as we make these steps forward. We don't want to set a trajectory that's going to lead us into a brick wall. We got to be intentional about the direction we start moving.
To Steve, I got something that came in to Hackenbrode's point that many career centers are experiencing an increase in enrollment. Should we not take a breath and pause changing major things at like higher pay rates, paying like training? We are acute service, so is it possible that we tend to make major business decisions with an acute mindset? Which that's a good point.
Real good point.
That's a really good point.
You look at, talking about negotiations and bargaining. I mean, that's for departments that have, collective bargaining every 3 years, you have to sit at the table and there's a process in the state. So you can, as administrative staff, say strategically, this is going to be our plan, but the union has a seat at the table and they, are rowing the boat too. So there's
maybe just like making sure that the decisions that are being made and let them come to light first to see if they actually are being, worked first, maybe not make major changes so quickly.
Yeah, that's the challenging part of being a fire chief is typically we don't deal with one issue at a time. Our job is very multifaceted. Yeah. So we have a number of balls we're juggling in the air and we have to manage those and do the best we can. So
I think you can also be paralyzed by inaction, right? So you've got to strike that balance between what do you need to do for your department, your community, and how are you going to do it versus just analyzing, and always looking around you to see what's going on. The worst thing you can do is just continue to do that with no action. So I think you want to have a plan, but you want to be prepared to have to pivot if you can and have contingencies built into that. In Miami Township, and I know Chief Jetter's back there with me, and our rule is always we'll try something for 6 months, and if it's not working, we'll figure it out and we'll go in a different direction. And generally, that's not just me as the chief making that decision. There's a few of us that are involved in that to try to figure out, are we doing the right thing? Is it working? Do we need to pivot? And that's just something you need to be prepared to do, is always have that plan B, plan C in your pocket.
Yeah, one of the biggest, problems in our line of work is because we've always done it that way. Right. I just wanted to share an example just real quick. When we did our first hiring process, and before I was fire chief, we had 7 applicants, and we were getting ready to hire quite a few people. So what we did was we worked with the union, made a firefighter EMT position because we had to be a paramedic to be full-time for years. That was just how we always done it, but it wasn't working for us. So we agreed to go ahead and hire, people with an EMT certification, and then if they want to go to paramedic school, we would work on that later. And we ended up getting over 150 applicants. We were able to bring in some really quality candidates, and it worked very well for us. Well, a number of chiefs around the area heard that we got 150 applications, and they called me and were like, hey, how did you do it? And I would tell them some things we did. The EMT was just one thing, but it was the most pertinent example. And they would, they would immediately push back. Well, we can't do that. Well, why can't you? Well, because you have to be a paramedic to work at our department. I understand that, but how many paramedics do you have? And so there would be a lot of conversations that they would want to argue or debate the premise, and it was just fell back on, well, that's, how we do it, and they weren't being very innovative, and that's kind of why they were having a tough time recruiting new members.
And that's the kind of thinking that keeps us paralyzed. Through these conversations, through this study and this issue, there's a lot of things that I thought years ago I would never think that way. I would never think that that's okay. I would never, and I've learned some things. Absolutes are difficult things to get past. Don't say never or always. But getting past that way we've always done it, to just open your mind enough, not so much that your brain falls out, but open your mind enough to see that there are opportunities that maybe aren't as detrimental as you thought they would be. But back to the question, sometimes we do react very quickly because that's what we do. That's how we're ingrained. And I don't think this issue that we're discussing is one of those where this is the solution. And no, like I said before, we've got to set a very intelligent path ahead. We've got to be very thoughtful about the direction we go. Chief Kelly and I reviewed a white paper written by another state association, and we both read it, shared our thoughts afterwards. It was pretty bland. I don't know that they dove in the way we're hoping to dive in. They did address that there's a problem. They spoke to why there's a problem, but didn't offer any solutions. And after some time has passed now, I see why they came to that conclusion, because the solutions to these problems that we're discussing, they're not easy. They're going to challenge us to work outside of where we're comfortable. They're going to cause us to have to maybe accept things that we've never done before or never done it that way as a possible solution. I'm not saying it's going to solve it, but a possible solution.
Let's go away, do some takeaways.
I think just be open to the opportunity to have these discussions, right? You don't live in fear of making mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes as we're trying to navigate this process, but also don't make your decisions in a vacuum. Involve other people, have the conversations. If anything that our cell phones and social media has taught us is that people have a lot of opinions about a lot of different things, but we probably should be sitting down and looking at one another to have these conversations because they're challenging. But step into those. That's the only way that we're by doing this and hearing from you and these questions, having these conversations out in the hallway and during meals and stuff, that's one part of the process, but keep moving forward with it.
My takeaway would be build a bulletproof culture. As organizational leaders, one of the things that we have in our immediate purview and ability to control is the culture of our department. Work on building that culture. It doesn't cost that much. It's not going to necessarily be the end of the road. There are other things that you're going to have to work on. But if you have a culture that people want to belong to, there are some forgivenesses for a little less pay, fewer benefits if the culture is outstanding and it's something you really want to be a part of. It's going to help your recruitment and retention efforts, having that strong culture.
I would say be creative and don't be afraid to try new things, but always make sure that you have a plan, but understand that all plans do not survive first contact with the enemy. So your plan is not going to work out the first time. So make sure you have a plan B and a plan C so that you can pivot and make your plan ultimately work, because the only guarantee is that you're going to fail at times. And just make sure that you're able to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and keep moving forward.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, Premier, Professional, and Proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.